Hi everyone, in today's video, I'm going to talk about Golden Dragon Shiryu, who is the latest Astral Knight that's been added to the game. Now, as usual, I'll be going through his skill, his clothes, and constellation, etc. But I can tell you up front that he is probably going to be a character that you can skip altogether. Now, normally what happens for Astral characters is that if you are able to get them for free, and because you can link up to another character and copy that character's star level, that essentially can mean you can get a free 16-star character straight away, which is really nice. The only problem here is that in one of the recent updates, in the shop they have added Gemini Cannon in the shop. So what that actually means is the same amount of resource that's required in order to get Gold Dragon Shiryu, you can theoretically get another copy of Gemini Cannon. And also in the other shop, which also eats up currency, you can also get Evil Sega. And by the way this is doing, I'm gonna guess in the future they're also gonna have more updates where they're gonna add more light and dark characters in the shop. So actually, even though you are getting this character for free, the opportunity cost is now actually equal to like 1/2 or 2 light and dark characters. And in that case, it's probably not actually gonna be worth it. So that's just something for you to bear in mind. Now, when however, I do want to also mention, obviously, if you're actually like a collection fan, you do want every single character in the game, and also, let's say you are well and you're already hitting your maximum power resonance level, and you need this extra character, to get a +5 level, then feel free to go ahead and do that. I'm more talking about kind of if you purely think about from like trader fan and opportunity cost point of view, then he may not actually be the best choice. Because it's just a pretty average character, in all honesty. But yeah, that's enough being said. Let's move on straight into his skills. So his ultimate is a single target hit, dealing 550% damage, and the most noticeable thing here is that it is able to knock up the enemy for 4 seconds, which sounds really good on paper. 4 seconds is actually really long in terms of interruption skill. The only problem is this is a single target, and it hits the enemy opposite. Now, if you actually think about Astral Shiryu, he's a tank. So what that basically means is that he is most likely going to face opposite a tank because he's at front row. So what you're actually interrupting is an enemy tank. And now the question is, why would I want to interrupt an enemy tank that much, right? If this is RNG or actually able to hit a back row, then I can potentially interrupt an enemy DPS, etc., and that'd be great. But because this is only going to be affecting enemy tanks, then I would argue this is pretty much a wasted skill. So that's kind of my thought on this one. His skill 2 basically increases defense by 40% and at the same time also recharge HP. Now, if you haven't read on Libradoko skills, then Libradoko have like a rejuvenation, which is very similar, like raised defense and HP recovery. The scaling on this one is way lower than Libradoko. So if you do have to make a comparison to another knight, you can already tell the skill by itself is not very good. What is able to improve it, however, is his clothes later on. So I will cover a bit more about the skill once we move to the clothes section. Now, if we move to his skill 3, this is pretty much his only team helping ability, and what's able to do is increase, first of all, himself maximum HP by 25%, but also your entire team is going to be benefiting from another 60% of that 25%, which is going to be 15% of HP increase. So basically, as soon as he enters the battle, your entire team get an extra 15% increase in HP, and that's actually going to be really, really nice. Now, you can probably already tell this is very similar to lots of other opening protection knights, similar to Asinagokos, Moses, Surplus Shun, Astral Shun, etc., which is exactly right. And because there are already so many options, that's why I argue, even though the skill is really nice, it's probably not going to be your priority because there are already so many other options. And if you do compare all of the options, this is probably the worst one out of all of them. But a direct comparison I can make is to Astral Shun, right? They're both Astral Knights, so they are both characters you are able to get straight away without too much hassle, and you are able to max them all up. Astral Shun is able to increase 40% defense. This is only increasing HP by 15%, so you can tell Astral Shun is definitely way better. I think the only advantage this skill may have is that because this is an actual skill rather than let's say need to be improved by clothes or constellation, which pretty much all of the other protection knights need. I think maybe Krishna is the only one which doesn't require. But yeah, so if you do want to think of a budget option because you have no close resource, you have no blood of God, etc., and you have no constellation, and you just need a budget option in order to have an opening protection, then Shuri is probably the best choice because the only other choice would be Krishna. I think Krishna is probably better because that's a shield rather than a HP increase. But at the same time, Krishna, you still need to get copies of himself in order to level him up. Whereas Shuru, at least, is an astronaut, so he can be immediate 16 star if you do link it to another 16 star. So that's pretty much the only advantage Shuru is going to have in comparison to other opening protection knights. So once again, that kind of just shows it pretty bad as a character, I guess, in some sense. Um, Lastly, we have Skillful, which is kind of his main damage dealing attack, and it's actually quite interesting. Basically, what it says is when he is about to die, he is going to deal damage, which is 600% attack at the base level, but at the same time, for every 500 customer, it's going to increase by an extra 3%. And that can be up to 1500% of his attack. So that's a crazy amount of damage scaling. So this can potentially allow him to take another enemy down with him when he dies. So that's actually quite useful. And it does go a bit even better later on once we move on to his close and constellation as well. So this is basically what you need to know for this one. All right, now let's move on to. I want to do constellation first, and now I'll tell you why. So for constellation, basically, what happens is he's going to get an extra defense bonus of 400% at the start of the battle. However, he loses 25% defense then every single second. So basically, what this means is about. So obviously, it's an increase of 400%. So basically, you're going to start off with 500% defense, and then afterwards, you lose 25% defense per second. So after 20 seconds, it's going to get a defense of 0, which is a really double-edged sword, I guess you can think of. On the good side, basically, it's going to be impossible to do much damage to him at the start. Like 400% increase in defense, that's absolutely crazy. But then 20 seconds afterwards, he's going to become so fragile, it's going to be really easy to actually kill him. So at face level, his constellation is a bit of a double-edged sword. So you may think, I don't really know what to do with this because yes, he increased defense by so high, but it's only defense of himself. And then afterwards, you have your tank with 0 defense. Like, what would you want to do then? And the reason why you want to do that is actually in conjunction with his clothes, because at level 20 and level 30 of his clothes, what it then says is that for every 10% defense loss, he's going to get extra attack and also life steal, so the leech ability. Now, like I said, you can lose all the way up to 500% defense. And what that basically means is that you can get 50% extra attack and life steal. And that's basically how Astral Shiryu is going to survive in the battle. At the start, he's going to rely on his incredibly high defense. But then as the battle goes on, all of his defense is then going to turn into attack. And he's now then going to try to survive by using life drain instead, life steal instead. So that's kind of how it works. And that kind of makes it a bit interesting because you are almost changing it from a defensive character into an attacking character, and that's why I then also said skill 4 also makes it's really interesting because at the end when he dies, very likely first of all because he has ridiculously high amount of defense at the start, you are almost guaranteed to be able to survive for at least 10-15 seconds, right? So you are going to accumulate a lot of Cosmo already as a result, so your damage output is going to be high, and on top of that your attack is already going to be scaled because your attack is going to be scaled based on the fact that your defense all turned into attack, and that's going to make your skill 4 even more dangerous. So that's kind of how the whole entire skill kit for Astral Shiryu works. Now, so obviously, if you are not planning to get his clothes all the way up to 20 or 30, then I will argue there's no point leveling up his constellation because his constellation is just going to be a double-edged sword. There's no clear benefit. And also at the same time, if you don't have his clothes, then there's no point for you to do any if you don't have his constellation in the first place, then there's no point to level up your clothes to level 20 or level 30 because you are not going to reduce your defense, and therefore you're not going to turn your you're not going to reduce your defense over time, and then therefore you're not actually turning your defense into attack. So level 20 and level 30 would then just be wasted as well. So basically that kind of means that if you do want to actually use this character properly, you have to go all out or all budget on both fronts. So either like no close, no constellation, or all close, full constellation, that kind of thing. Now I'm going to talk about level 10 and level 20, which I think is also really good. Just to show you that what would be a budget version of Astral Shiryu look like. So obviously, at full close, full constellation, you're turning defense into attack. Um, and what happens at that point, if you actually remember, is that your defense is going to be 0. So if you now look at this ability, increase defense by 40%, but your defense is already 0. So what are you actually increasing, right? So this almost becomes useless. And that's where level 10 of his clothes then come into helping. Because rather than just saying that you need to increase your defense by a certain amount, now it's just a static damage reduction by 50%. And that's actually going to be really good. Because now if you're saying about it, you have a 50% damage reduction, and now you have a lifesteal, and that's what makes him really bulky, even though he has 0 defense later on in the battle. The other interesting thing is that there's also this part about no need to keep the status of raising the shield. Now, I don't have to have this character. I'll make him with free currency purely because I just want to collect the character rather than anything else. However, um, judging by the words and the narrative of how they say, I'm gonna guess when you actually use this, what's gonna happen is when you're raising your shield, you probably won't be able to do any normal attacks or something like that. However, now with this, because you no longer need to raise the shield and you no longer need to keep the status, I'm guessing you can actually do normal attacks at the same time, or maybe even skill attacks at the same time. So I think there's also this added benefit as well. But yes, overall, I think if you're not planning to go all out to close and constellation, then level 10 of his close is enough. However, if you do want to go all out, then yeah, feel free to do so. And you get this kind of quite cool game mechanic of how you turn defense into attack as the battle goes on, which is interesting, I guess. But yeah, overall, you can probably see all of his skills. He's pretty average as a character. He it doesn't really do too much to protect the whole team. I mean, he does protect the whole team with his skill 3, his passive, but that's a really bad passive when you compare it to other like for like comparisons. So that's why I think it's already bad in that department. And then all of the other ones is kind of more either protecting himself, which is fair enough, or it's going to be more damage based. But at the same time, this is also a tank, and you're not really playing a tank for his damage, and that's why all around it, I just think the way Astral Shiryu is designed is a bit awkward, and why I think he's not a very good character. And hence why I also mentioned, right, if you have the same amount of resource where you can get him for free or 2 light and dark characters, what would you choose? It's a bit of a no-brainer that you go for the 2 light and dark, and therefore there's no point actually redeeming him for free. But yeah, that's just my thought. If you do want to collect the character, then of course go ahead. I personally am going to collect it because it just makes me feel good out of all of the characters in the game. But I know everyone's different, and so definitely have a think about this and decide whether you actually want to spend the resources to get this character.